Hi, welcome back. And what are we doing today? Well, obviously you probably read the title of this video, so you know that it's to do with the CD32. But I need to give a little bit of a run-up as to why I have a CD32 and why I'm trying to recap one. So if you watched the channel previously, you would have known that a few years ago now, I actually headed down to Worcester to rescue an Amiga 4000. I use the word rescue because Amiga 4000s pretty much always have a battery in them to back up the clock, and that battery, which is a barrel battery, a Varta brand battery pretty much always, and that battery pretty much always leaks. And then it leaks all over the logic board, and it's in the area of the Amiga 4000. Mine's actually there in the background. And what it does is it does a job on the battery back clock area, which doesn't sound too bad because you don't really need the battery back clock these days unless you're doing, you know, real work, which mostly we aren't, right? So not really a big issue. But unfortunately, in the Amiga 4000, that's also right next to the main system memory, which, yeah, isn't so trivial. So in my particular Amiga 4000, I whizzed off to Worcester, bought it off the guy. It was in a video which I called a hoard, because there was a bunch of other stuff as well. There was like a oscilloscope, a vector scope, CD-ROM, Amiga 500 CD-ROM drive. Yeah, I feel like I'm on the generation game. Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff, and pretty much everything didn't work, and it cost a lot of money. And I got it home, and the Amiga 4000 had actually got battery damage, and I just had that sickening feeling, thinking that maybe I just spent a lot of money on this machine, which is a dream machine for me, one of my machines that I had back in the day, and I wanted to get back in my collection. Anyway, jump forward, I renovate that machine and I got it working. And then I think it was late last year, which is 2024, I was putting the finishing touches on my Amiga 4000, and I thought, yeah, tell you what would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Would be that if it could actually be used as a CD-ROM Amiga. And what I mean by that is that towards the end of the life of Commodore, they made an Amiga called the CD32, which was specifically designed, you can imagine by the name, to play games from CD rather than them coming from the hard drive. So, you know, that would keep costs down. It would allow for full motion video, which is a hot thing at the time. And that would allow games which were starting to really bloat. An example would be Beneath a Steel Sky, which was, I think, 25 floppy disks. Yeah, that started to get pretty crazy. It's a good game, but it just was designed really for the CD-ROM era. So Commodore thought they would make that happen. They would release that console and everything would be wonderful. And unfortunately, they went bankrupt pretty soon after. And that was not really the fault of the CD32. And because of that, I think it's picked up a lot of negative karma over the years in the community. And in fact, it's really an Amiga 1200, which is a good machine, really good machine, with the added benefit of having a CD-ROM built in. It's got this thing called the Akiko chip as well, which does aids in the translation from chunky graphics to planar graphics. I'm not really going to get into that, but basically on the PC at the time, the PC was based on chunky graphics, and there were a lot of games being developed on the PC that could have been easily ported to the Amiga, but the Amiga used planar graphics, which is a completely different system. And I think the idea with the Akiko chip was that you didn't really have to worry about it too much. You could just make some calls to that chip and it would convert your chunky graphics into planar, and then the Amiga could display them. A lot of debate in the community about whether that chip was worth the effort, whether it was whether it was a viable system. I personally think that it was. And I think a lot of people forget that the CD32 didn't have an accelerator, didn't have a 68030, it was 68020 based. And because of that, for the spec of that machine, Commodore decided it needed that chip to help do this conversion. And I think any help helps. You know, it's not going to slow things down unless you put like a 68040 in a CD32, which you couldn't do. So yeah, that was moot. So a couple of years ago, I think it was now, I met a guy called Leigh, Leigh's Australian, and he's a friend of mine, I'd like to say. And he had headed back to Australia to see his family, from what I understand. And while he was over there, a member of his family mentioned that there was a gentleman, I think is a relative of his, had a bunch of old computers in a garage. Leigh was then sent over to the guy to have a look and see if there was anything there he wanted to buy, and also to give the guy advice. And he goes down into the basement of this guy's garage. He's built like an underground basement underneath his garage. Where the carpet was a staircase going down, and down underneath his garage was this large room full of old retro tech. So the guy was asking him what he thought, and Leigh said, well, they all look amazing. They're all in really good condition. And Leigh hadn't really gone there with the intention of buying anything, but he did have a little bit of money. So he said to the guy, can I make an offer for some of this stuff? And Leigh made an offer for an Amiga 3000, the CD32, and also I think it was a Commodore 64 in one of those Aussie-style Commodore C cases. The guy agreed. He then brought them back to the UK. By the way, all that stuff is sold now because Leigh advised the guy to sell it because of the same reason, you know, with my Amiga 4000, that, you know, if he didn't do that, then they would probably get destroyed. The capacitors are leaking, the batteries are leaking. So it was actually a really good idea for that guy to sell those. I think he's pretty elderly, so it made sense for him to cash in his chips and maybe go off on a world, you know, holiday, world cruise or something like that. So I actually was lucky enough to get hold of Leigh's Amiga 3000, and there's a video where you can actually see I repaired that. His Amiga 3000 did actually have battery damage as well, but in this case in a slightly different location. But it actually was in an area where the battery back clock is, again, of course, it's right next to the battery, so it would make sense. And I actually had to rebuild the circuit for that machine. When I borrowed that machine to help repair it, Leigh showed me some photographs of his CD32. And he showed me some caps in it which were really bulging, and I remember them looking terrible. And I said to him, well, you know, if the A3000 repair goes okay, would you consider letting me repair your CD32? And the reason for that was, when I actually was finishing off my Amiga 4000, I put a CD-ROM in it, and the aim was to get it to be, as I said earlier, an Amiga with a, you know, a CD-based Amiga like a CD32. Unfortunately, the Amiga 4000's got a terrible case design, and if you're not careful, you can find yourself taking it completely apart just to make minor changes. And I found that to get the CD-ROM in, I had to take things out and put things back in. And along the way, something got stressed, and now it doesn't work. It does boot. Well, I say it boots. It gets to the workbench screen. Doesn't boot any further than that. And also it can show some errors, which I've got a feeling are to do with the riser card. Also, it might be to do with the SCSI card in it. I don't know. Anyway, so the point is, my first introduction to CD-ROM based Amiga games didn't happen. And so about a month and a half ago, Leigh actually handed over his CD32 to me. And here it is, the star of the show today. And as you can see, I hope you can see that there, the plastic is still on it. So it looks like this machine may not have been used at all. Or if it was used very, very lightly. The owner didn't really get that much use out of it. The gentleman, as far as I know, didn't have a box. Or if he did have it, I'm not sure if Leigh bought it, but couldn't send it from Australia. But yeah, it's still got the protective plastic on it. I've taken this apart. I've had a look inside, and we'll have a look at the inside of this in a moment. And it's actually in pretty good condition. And my memory of that, capacitor that was bulging and was spewing acid everywhere and it was all destroyed turned out not to be true. It is leaking, but I don't think it's done any major damage yet. So what we're aiming to do in this video is to recap Leigh's machine. I will be testing it before I do that to make sure it's working, so that when I recap it, I am then aware of whether I buggered it up or not. I hope I don't. I am taking quite a lot of steps to avoid doing that. I've got some chip quick or equivalent solder on order. It was meant to arrive today, and really bizarrely, Amazon sent me 2 Jedi chopsticks instead. I mean, I know it sounds bizarre, but they are literally chopsticks, which are lightsabers. And I assume that somebody had bought them for a child, maybe, or somebody else who likes using chopsticks. But I opened up the box expecting to see some chip quick solder, and instead there's 2 chopsticks with little battery buttons on them, so you can turn them on and have them glow, and you can go woo woo. Yeah, a little bit disappointing for me, and obviously potentially disappointing for whoever it was meant to get those. If that was a cross-up or if they just mispicked them at the factory or at the warehouse, I really don't know, to be honest. But there we go. Can't do the repair today. Can't start taking off the capacitors because that chip quick solder is actually designed to melt at a lower temperature, which makes removing capacitors a lot safer because you don't have to heat them up as much. So that's one of my precautions. And that didn't cost that much money. I think it was like £20 for, I think it's 4.5 foot of this solder. And you don't need that much of it. You're only using little bits of it to add to the logic board to, as I said, make it easier to get the solder off. So I did make a slightly more extravagant purchase, and that was to make sure that I didn't make a pig's breakfast of Leigh's CD32. And I've got that here. What I also bought was a CD32. So this is going to be my CD32, and obviously this will take away the onus on me to get my Amiga 4000 working with at least a CD-ROM in it, although pretty much will get that working, don't worry. But I think it's a really good thing to have a spare machine, a second machine, working machine, before you repair anything, right? I've never recapped a CD32. So if there does turn out to be a fault in Leigh's machine down there, you'll notice mine doesn't have the stickers on it. So this definitely is my machine. Just to show you, hang on, just make sure I don't drop these. There you are. There's the 2 of them at the same time. Yeah, I know, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, if you do find there's a fault with the machine, it's always much easier to find that fault if you have a machine that's working. So I'm hoping that at least one of these machines is working. If Leigh's machine is working and this one isn't, then Leigh's machine can help to fix mine. And if mine is working, vice versa. And if they're both working, hurrah, wonderful. All I will need to do is to remove the caps carefully, put the caps back on. Everything's good. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start off by going over to my repair area over there, and I'm going to take these machines apart and we'll have a quick look at the logic board. I'll show you how you take them apart. I've already partially disassembled this, and the reason why I did that is because it has a ribbon cable, which is a little bit of a pain, to be honest, to take it apart. And what I'm going to do is, to test these, I'm actually going to test them when they're taken apart, because it's much easier then to put that ribbon cable back in and take it back out and make sure I don't damage it, because that's one of the most fragile parts of this machine. Okay, so anyway, I hope we're clear on what we've got to do in this mission. Let's move over to the repair area over there and we'll start work on both of these machines. But before we do that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay, where you can make your tech dreams a reality. And now in PCBWay's Project Share, you can upload your projects and share them with the community. And if you do use any of these projects, a percentage of the money that you pay will actually go to the author. So you can share your projects, and you can also benefit the projects that others have shared on PCBWay. So if you do have any projects, why not upload them to PCBWay and get them out to the community? And of course, why don't you browse the Project Share and see if there's something there that's interesting for you? Because whether it's PCB prototyping, PCB assembly, 3D printing, or even CNC machining, PCBWay is the way. Starting with an instant quote for your PCB projects, PCBWay will leap into action, building your PCB, assembling it for you if you wish, and once it's passed their quality tests, it'll be winging its way to you in a flash. PCBWay, PCB prototyping the easy way. Right then, this is Leigh's machine. So, got to be careful I don't get these 2 machines mixed up. Obviously, we've got the labels on here. But I was thinking about it, when I get the logic board out, they're going to look pretty much identical apart from the caps. But of course, once the caps are off, yeah, they're going to be identical. So, there is a distinguishing factor on this. It's actually got wonky AV ports on the back. It's a bit weird. Don't understand why that happened, but I've seen that on other videos about the CD32. So it's a bit strange, but there we are. So let's turn it over. I've got a rubber mat here to protect it. Make sure it doesn't get damaged. There's no metal on there. So let's put that like that. As I said, I've already taken these apart once, so it's a lot easier once you've done that because the RF shield is a lot easier to take off. So let's just take that screw out. Leigh's actually has more screws than mine. I don't know why mine seems to be missing, I think, 1 or 2. But you know what it's like with these things. You don't very often need all the screws that they put in. They were kind of overly cautious. So there we go. I think that's it. Yeah, and then you have this expansion bay here as well. So you can take that screw to take that off if you want to. But generally, we're just going to leave it. So when you're taking these apart normally, you've got to be careful because over here, there's a ribbon cable that goes down through the RF shield and then plugs into the logic board. And there's a clip on it to hold it in. That's actually quite difficult to get off. And yeah, you don't want to keep on doing that. It's going to stress out the cable. So what I've done is this is actually put together right now without that actually plugged in. So let's see if I can get this off. Let me take the expansion bay off as well, because I find that can actually hold it in place as well a bit. Don't know why they put this chunking screw for the bay. Don't quite understand why they did that. And that can be quite difficult to get out as well. So let's just try and ease it apart. There we go. Just make sure there's nothing over here that's going to cause any damage. It shouldn't. That is actually the ribbon cable. And as you can see in this case, Leigh's already done that for me. This yellow tape is Leigh taping things down. I think it was for when it was transported. So obviously I'll have to take this stuff off. And now it's actually sort of like duct tape. Let's put this out of the way for a second. Let's release everything. There we are. So yeah, what I'll be doing is I'll be taking this ribbon cable and plug it in here to test it. But before we can do that, we need to liberate the logic board. So let me just take this out of the way. This actually clips in here. Plastic clips. So that's destined to break pretty soon. You know what it's like with this old plastic. Then you've got metal tabs on here. I bent these down just so I could put the case back on. But this should come off relatively easily once I take out this screw here. There's a screw here. I think that one's already... No, actually, this one's not off. And I think there's another one here. So this one I've actually put on outside of the RF shield. So let's just take that off. RF shield should come off. There we go. Put that out of the way over here. And holding the logic board down are 3 screws. That one's just come off. Let's get this one off. So it's a relatively easy machine to get open, apart from the ribbon cable. The ribbon cable plugs in there once you've got that out, which is a little bit fiddly. On mine, this little bracket came off. So I think you put the cable in and then you push that down to hold it on. So I'm going to leave mine off for now until I put it together. And hopefully on here now, if I show you. But yeah, these are all angled in this direction a little bit, pointing a little bit in this direction. They're all wonky. It's quite strange. But yeah, that's just the way it was when I got it. So let's get it out of the case. There we are. We'll put this out of the way over here. What I'll do is, I think I'll put some tape on this, maybe Leigh's tape. Let's get some of this yellow tape and use it as a marker to indicate that this is his case and that this is his RF shield. There we go. So there we are. Won't get those mixed up. And we'll put some tape here, inside here, just to indicate that that's the inside of his case at the top. Okay, so, and we just need to take off the RF shield off the bottom. So I don't know if I've done it before with this one. Don't think I have. So let's see if we can get it out without too much ado. I know it's a bit fiddly. I know that when I took mine out, it was a bit fiddly. So there we go. The back, and then if I pull it backwards. What I'm trying to do is to not slice my fingers on the RF shield because it's thin cut metal and Oh yeah, these can be a little bit painful to get out. So I think what I need to do is to change my screwdriver bit to something a bit thin. So this is a flat bladed screwdriver bit, and I'm just going to try and prise these out a bit, because these basically lock onto these. There's like little tabs on here. Okay, and there we go. Easy enough. A little bit of tape on this, I guess, to show that it's Leigh's. I wish I hadn't folded this up now. There we are. Let's just stick that on there. Okay, so this is Leigh's logic board. And the caps which are problematic are these two here. I'll show you close-ups of these. This one here, which you can see is bulging really badly. And this one here is also bulging quite a bit. These are the two which I've noticed seem to be problematic. Whenever I've watched anybody else's video where they do this, these two caps always seem to be the problem ones. There is another cap here, through-hole cap. But you'll see that if I turn it around, there are many, many surface-mounted caps. I'm not sure how many there are, I think. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, something like 28 caps. Yeah, is a lot. So I'm going to have to get all of those off to make sure that they obviously don't leak. They are from the era of the capacitor plague, so there is a chance that they will leak. They may be already leaking. I don't see much or any corrosion on the board. And a sign of that is that the solder pads at their bases are quite shiny. So it doesn't look like any electrolyte has come out of these. These very often fail through the bottom, so they can be quite nasty. These often fail through the bottom as well. But again, I'm not seeing too much corrosion right now. So I'm hoping that we've got to these before they've actually leaked. This one is actually already leaking through the top a little bit, but it looks like the electrolyte hasn't actually got down onto the board. So fingers crossed, we're going to find that this hasn't actually got any long-term damage. So the next stage now is to get my board out as well, get it ready, because I'm going to have to remove the caps on both of them. Once I've done that, I will need to obviously put on that chip quick solder that I mentioned earlier. And the idea of that is basically that when you're trying to take off surface mounted capacitors, you want to try and heat up the solder for as little time as possible, because you don't want to transfer a huge amount of heat into the logic board. And the best way of doing that is to use a solder that has a low melting point, because it will melt at a low melting point. And then you can actually get the caps off with the board receiving as little heat as possible. The less heat on the board, the less potential damage there is to the pads. You've got less of a chance that the pads will actually lift. So fingers crossed, we're not going to get any pads lifting in on either Leigh's board here or my board. But we'll have to see how that goes. But before we do that, what I do need to do is to test this machine. It has not been tested as far as I know by Leigh. I do have Leigh's power supply. I haven't actually got a power supply for my CD32. It came as just the bare machine. I don't have a power supply. I don't have controllers. So there are a couple of things I'll have to get hold of. Pretty rare these days, so you can imagine they're quite costly. And I don't really want to spend money on those until I know my machine is working and I've recapped it. And I know it's still working after the recap. So yeah, what I'm going to do next is set up this area. I need to put a monitor here. And the other thing I need to do is I need to burn a CD-ROM, because I don't actually have any CD32 games, you can imagine. I don't think Leigh was given any either. So the only thing I can really do is to burn one, download an image and burn it. Because I was a Bitmap brother, I think I'll do that with the Bitmap Brothers game, because there is a CD32 version of the Chaos engine. So let's download that, and I think we'll use that. So it's the next day, and last night, quite late actually, I downloaded a torrent which actually has every single CD32 game in it, which is great, so I can test it out. Burnt this using my modern CD-ROM burner, which I have set up on my PC. And I've done a little bit of testing earlier. Actually, I'm using a new monitor here as well. I'll talk about that in a short while. Bought that from AliExpress, and what I'm hoping to do is a little project with Leigh. I'm going to be sort of like the silent partner in it. And then, so the aim is to hopefully take that monitor and turn it into something special. But in the meantime, I'm just testing it out as a general monitor, see what it's like. It's quite good. It's got VGA input, HDMI, and also composite. So that's pretty cool for a lot of retro stuff. It's also 4:3, which is really good. However, I must admit, when I first got it, I thought it wasn't very good because the grays were washed out. There was a graphical issue, but it turns out the graphical issue was because I had the wrong aspect ratio set. It has one aspect ratio where the picture's just terrible and all the others are great, so that's weird. And then the other thing is I'm putting this through a RetroTink, and it turned out that the RetroTink had a gamma setting which was boosting the image, so all the blacks look washed out. But in reality, that doesn't really have to be the case. You can adjust that and get that just right. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. I'm quite impressed with it. So this is plugged in. I've got the cable there, the ribbon cable. I've got it resting on its back hatch to make sure it doesn't make any contact with the logic board, so we don't get any shorts. And let's see what happens when we turn it on. So there's no sound actually in this either, unfortunately. Let's turn that on. Should get a picture. The monitor's showing that it's synced with something. And yeah, the disc is rotating. You can hear it doing something. I can see the CD-ROM access light there, hopefully in amber. And now we've got this screen. This screen means it's actually loading software. It has a different screen for where you don't actually have a disc plugged in. So let's let it boot up. There we are, Renegade, a company which I used to work with back in the day. And there we are, the Chaos Engine. I've got the controller plugged in. I never actually got to play the game. I've played the Chaos Engine, I mean on the CD32. But what I'm finding is that it gets here, it doesn't seem to get any further. And earlier today, when I was getting this all set up and testing it, it worked better than this. It actually got to the main menu. It went through the cutscene, and right now it's not showing the cutscene at all. So I think what might be happening is something that was explained to me by Mark Fix's stuff, because he said he'd had machines in the past where they hadn't been used for many years. The capacitors were therefore not really reformed properly. And when you actually turned it on, they started to reform. And then what could happen is the capacitors which were starting to fail would then fail much faster than they had before. They were in a sort of stasis, and then all of a sudden they would be sort of getting worse. So anyway, yeah, right now the screen's gone blank. Don't know if that means it's actually going to do the cutscene. Oh, it is, okay. So it's in this little attract mode. It's very good, actually, the intro. But like I said, I've not actually managed to get to the title screen. I don't know if that's because it was taking a long time to load. Let's try pressing a button. Got the joypad plugged in. Ah, okay, maybe we skipped it. I don't know if it's actually loading up the main game. There's no feedback, so let's just give it a second. So yeah, I'm wondering whether that's happened or whether it's just that I'm not familiar with this game and you have to give it some time to load. I'm really not sure, but I'm a little bit concerned that the machine is not working correctly. I mean, well, it's loaded the game and the graphics look good and there's no sound because of the set I've got here. I've got SCART going from here into the RetroTink, and I think the RetroTink isn't actually putting that sound into the HDMI, which is a bit odd, or it's going from the RetroTink into my capture device, and then maybe the capture device. Yeah, here we go. So you're getting these glitchy graphics, whereas earlier today, that was showing up with the correct player 1, player 2 and all that. So either the CD-ROM has gone a bit dodgy, which might be possible. I haven't touched it. I haven't taken it out until I did just now. So yeah, seems to be working. Picture's pretty good. Not really getting much glitching in terms of the image flickering or anything like that. But as you can see, there is some kind of problem with this software anyway. It's not loading this correctly. But overall, it seems to be good. I don't think recapping it is going to make it worse. Let's put it that way, unless I make a big mistake. So we know what state it's in now. It is working. Not sure about the sound. I'll have a quick look if I can work out how to get the sound working. It'd be good to hear the sound. But yeah, basically it is working. We just need to recap it, I think. So while I'm here, I'm going to go and get my other machine, my CD32, and we'll give that a quick test as well, and we'll see what states that's in. So this is my CD32. Let's see what happens when we turn it on. Unfortunately, it's not very good news, to be honest. Got the ribbon cable plugged in there. Got the control panel at the front. Without that, you can't reset the machine. So let's just rest this on top like the other one, making sure it doesn't short. And I'm going to turn it on. I think you can just about see the power there, can't you? Yeah. So let's turn it on. And we get power. which is a good sign. That's obviously a good thing, that power is getting through to the LED. And I'm assuming it's coming out of reset. And there is video, as you can see. But the problem is two obvious things. Number one, CD-ROM drive doesn't spin. LED light doesn't come on for it. No activity, no spinning, nothing whatsoever. And I've tried leaving it on for a while and it never gets anywhere past this. Just a blank screen, nothing going on at all. So yeah, I don't know. I checked the voltages on the logic board, and this is where having two machines comes into play. And I did check around at the power supply here coming in, and I was seeing, I think it was for the 5-volt rail, it was 4.8, and for the 12-volt rail, I think it was 11.5, something like that, which both I think are okay. But when I was checking some of the chips around the board, I was seeing some odd voltages. One of the chips had 6.1 on it, which is a bit weird. That doesn't seem right. Obviously, that could be a 12-volt rail, which has been ramped down to be that with resistors, but it's difficult to say really, because what I need now is really a schematic of this, and I need to know what all the chips are, etc., etc. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go online and have a look and see if anybody else has had any sort of issues with one of these machines, and see if there are common failures that happen with these machines, because it could be that it's a common failure, or it could be that there's some simple thing that I haven't thought of. Pressing reset doesn't seem to do much, which is a bit worrying. I'm wondering if maybe the CPU in this is dead, because you would expect that if I pressed that, I guess, would the light go off? I'm not sure. I'd have to test that on the other machine, but I would expect some kind of reaction, and it just seems very, very quiet. So this might be, I think I will recap it. I'm not going to really show that in this video. I don't think there's any benefit, because you're not going to see any difference before recapping it and after. I don't think that's a bad thing to do, because we need to get these capacitors off. They are going to cause a problem. And the initial idea about having another machine as well was that I could practice on this recapping before I obviously moved on to Leigh's. So I'm going to carry on doing that. But like I said, I'm not really going to show that in this video. I think we'll concentrate on Leigh's, because at least there are some signs of life there. It booted up. It was almost playing the Chaos engine. I didn't anticipate this. This is all happening live. I plugged it in, and as you can see, nothing. Let's just turn it off. So let's just turn it on again. Yeah, that comes on instantly, so I'm not even sure if there's any logic involved with that. Probably not. But like I said, there are some signs of life. There is some kind of video, I think. It's outputting something, which suggests that the video chip is working. So yeah, let me all unplug this. And what I think I'll do is I'll start removing the caps from this. Like I said, I need to practice it. So let's practice on this, and then you'll catch me a little bit later when I do the same thing with Leigh's machine. Welcome back. I think it's like a little bit over a day since I recorded the last chapter. That day was Saturday, and today's Sunday. It's about 6 o'clock now. And yesterday, after doing quite a lot of work on my machine, I went out for the evening with some friends. So that was good fun, taking advantage of the summer. And today it's been cleanup time. But I did eventually get round to actually testing my board here. Now, this, as you can see, has been recapped. These are not the original caps here. These are the ones supplied by, let me just show you this. One of the things I found when you're actually trying to do stuff like this is getting all the parts together using a BOM, bill of materials. It's quite a lot of work. And, I'm not an expert in electronics as well, and you can find that you can actually get the wrong parts. They can also turn up and be absolutely tiny. That's an issue you can have as well if you're not paying attention to the scale of things. So I bought these from Retro Passion. I had 2 of these packets, one for my machine and one for Leigh's machine. So that's actually what I've used to recap this machine. I think they're all polymer, and apparently they reckon they're good. Other people say they're not. I always find in electronics that there's always a bit of a fight over, exactly what you should do. So these 2 caps, these are the ones which are generally installed backwards. And the reason for that is, I watched LRG's video on his recapping of a CD32 the other day. What he discovered was, when you take off the cap here, there's a silk screen that shows you the position on the board where you can put the cap. Now, it shows you the through holes for a through hole capacitor like these. But if you can see, there is actually the indication there that you can actually put a surface mounted cap as well. And it turns out that if you actually were to follow the surface mounted cap diagram, the cap would go on correctly. But if you follow the through hole diagram, I think it has the plus over here, it would be backwards. And that's exactly what they did in the factory. They put through holes here, even though pretty much all of them are surface mounted. I don't know why they did these with through hole caps, probably because of cost. But it cost the user a lot, I'll tell you, because Pretty much all of these machines have these installed backwards, and that means that these suffer. They don't actually explode or anything like that. They don't go short, but they do start to spew their guts really badly. Pretty much every single cap on this board when I was working on it actually had some evidence of leaking. And if you remember, this machine didn't work. So that was a bit of a stab for me. Couldn't believe it that I got this machine. You know, the person that sold it did say it was untested. Let me give you some highlights of what I went through to get this working. Any caps like this, which are in very close proximity, for instance, to this RF modulator can, they're a bit of a nightmare because I find it very difficult to get my soldering iron in there. You have to get it in there and solder that point there. I actually use several techniques to get the caps off on this board. I went through, so let me show, I bought these a while ago on AliExpress, direct from China. They're not amazing, I must admit. It's very difficult to get these 2 points here to align because you have to tighten these up and they counter-rotate basically. So as you're tightening this up, it rotates the top. So you push the top back and then it loosens it. Yeah, it's a pretty terrible design, I must admit. Cheap and cheerful, I would imagine. But I did actually use them on this board and they did actually manage to take off a number of caps. To do that, I would very often use this stuff, which is sort of, well, the main brand that you see with this is ChipQuick. But this is basically low melting point solder. I use Fast Chip. I don't know if this is a good brand or not. You get quite a small amount of it for the money that you pay, but it's specialist stuff. It's really meant to be used for when you're trying to remove capacitors from a board like this. So I very often would put that on first. So I would put it on here, put it on the other side. I found it had a tendency to go everywhere, and that was a bit of a pain. So cleaning up was often a bit more work. But basically, I found that in some cases it did help. And what it does is it melts at a very low temperature and then it transmits that heat to the old solder and then also makes that go molten as well. My friend said that you should really only hold the soldering iron close to the board for about 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds maybe for the most, but very often I had to do sometimes 10 seconds easily. And it was just because otherwise it doesn't have enough time for the heat to transmit up the solder underneath the pad and then come off. I found that when it was a very small cap like these ones, it was a lot faster. And in fact, with these, when I was actually putting on the ChipQuick solder, quite often they would just come off spontaneously because I guess the amount of solder and I think the heat, the can itself actually sucks up a lot of heat, which isn't good. But once that is sort of saturated, that transmits back down into the solder and it seems to become molten very quickly. So I found that very often with these ones in particular, it was actually coming off very easily. In fact, I didn't have to use the tweezers at all, pretty much all the time. I just had to do one side, maybe the other, go back and forth a couple of times, and then this would just come off. I did have one disaster. This cap here, not sure if you can see it, it's slightly higher than this one. I also use the cutting technique. So that's where you come in, well, you're meant to come in at quite a low angle like this and cut here on the can. And I actually found on this one, for whatever reason, this was quite difficult to come off. And when I did manage to cut it, the can eventually did cut, but at the same time, the 2 pads came off. No, God! So that was horrible. But I was very, very lucky, I must admit, because these are actually 2 of the surface mount capacitors that by complete chance can also be through-hole capacitors. So underneath here, there are actually 2 holes that you can actually put a wire through. So what I did was I cleaned out those holes, but I was very, very lucky, I must admit, because these are actually 2 of the surface mount capacitors that by complete chance can also be through-hole capacitors. So underneath here, there are actually 2 holes that you can actually put a wire through. So what I did was I cleaned out those holes and I got a leg from a capacitor and I soldered it through one hole and then bent it in this direction. And then I put the other one in the other hole and I bent it in that direction. I made sure that that polarity was correct. And then once I'd done that, so basically if you can imagine, it's one's going this way and the other was going that way. Made sure they didn't touch in the middle and I soldered them in so they were nice and strong. And then once I did that, I then soldered the cap to those wires. So that's how I managed to save the day with that cap there. What else was a bit, yeah, this one here, this was a real pain because it's right up against this can. So yeah, a very difficult one to solder that one. But generally, it wasn't too bad. A little bit nerve-wracking, you know, going round. I went from the largest to the smallest. I've made a diagram as well, which I'll show you shortly. Another technique that I used was I have 2 sort of standard soldering irons. I've got this one here, and this one is an Asian, and it actually uses removable irons, which is really nice. So you can actually basically swap these on the fly, which I did actually a number of times. When I bought it originally, I didn't think it was going to be that much of a thing. But you can basically swap the heads really quickly. It has a really strong power delivery, so this is the best iron for removing things quite quickly. It pumps a lot of power. And then this is my original soldering iron here. It's just a sort of bog standard, cheap and cheerful one that I got years ago when I first started trying to do this stuff. And I've had this hanging around as just basically a backup, just in case this were to fail. And if I was to get a replacement, then I've got this. So on a couple of occasions, I found that those tongs that I showed you didn't work because, for instance, they didn't fit behind there because of that curvature on them. So in that case, I used these. So I would have one iron like this, one iron like this, heating both sides. And sometimes I would swap it because I found that this one gives a lot more power and one side needed more power than the other. So I would swap it over and then, you know, and eventually that would pop off. I did have one explode. I think it was this one. Sorry, you can't see that. Let me just move that for you. Yeah, I think it was this one actually exploded. So I was using this technique where I was going either side and it wasn't coming off. And then all of a sudden it just went poof and the can went flying. I think it hit me in the face actually. Luckily I wear glasses when I'm doing this stuff. Yeah, that could be nasty, but that hit me. Yeah. So yeah, there's a number of different techniques. You know, like I said, you've got these tweezers that you can get from AliExpress, pretty cheap. I think they're only about £30. Obviously, it's a good idea to have a better soldering iron, something like this, an Asian. Very good. I've seen a review of it saying that it had problems, but I've not had any issues with it. And like I said, then you've got this old one, which doesn't have any different heads. It just came with this. But I use this now to also do the pincer technique. Once I got the caps off, it was then a case of cleaning them. So I was quite thorough in the way that I did that. I would very often put alcohol on and then clean it up. Well, actually, no, I would put flux on as well very often when I took these off, just to help the solder flow. And once I'd finished, there was still usually some flux left on. So I used a technique that I learned off a guy on the internet, very good, which is that you should always cut your solder braid into pieces like this. And the reason for that is it, number one, makes it easier to deploy like this. But it also means that when the heat goes into the solder wick, it doesn't disappear off into the reel and just basically heat the reel up. What you want to do is this wick to get very hot very quickly. So I was using pieces of this, cutting them off to this length, and then basically cleaning up. And I'll show you that later. And once I'd done that, alcohol, cotton buds to clean off the flux. Then I would then flux the pads, and then I would then put them on. This is the really fiddly bit. Put them on with these tweezers. Because I kept on thinking I could do it with my hands, and I haven't got, you know, gigantic sausage fingers, but all the same, you know, if you look at this, it's actually quite tiny. So it's just easier to put these on some pincers like this, tweezers, I should say. And I found that very often they would move. It was quite frustrating. So once you get into position, it's a very good idea to try and pin one side as quickly as you can. And then if you're lucky and that's aligned, you can then solder the other side. So yeah, that was the result of that. And as you can see, it all looks pretty neat. Final thing that I did, and I had a bit of a luxury in this regard, I had Leigh's CD32, which is not capped yet. And what I did was I compared every single one of these caps with Leigh's, making sure that they were the right type of cap. And also, it's like a triple check. I mean, I'd already checked this like twice, but I did it 3 times by doing a final inspection, just making sure that every single cap on here matched Leigh's, apart from these two, of course, which have to be soldered on in the opposite orientation for them to actually be correct. So all of that said, does it actually, well, has it made any improvement? Well, let's find out. Let me just set this up so I can show you. We'll give it a test set and we'll see what we can see. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to plug in the video. This is composite, same as with Leigh's. Not going to do anything else. So we got the power and we got the video, and that's all we really need to test it on a basic level. I'm not really worried about does it do anything else beyond doing anything, you know. So anyway, the moment of truth. Let's give it a try. Come on, come on, come on. And nothing. Ah! Yeah, look at that. Well, that's really that's an unexpected surprise, I must admit, because I was talking to my friend, he's a bit of an electronics expert, and you know, he's a bit further up the road in terms of learning this stuff than me. Well, quite a bit further actually, few years up the road. We were discussing this, you know, what could possibly be wrong with it. You know, it was his opinion that, you know, definitely wasn't the caps, because that wouldn't have any, you know, wouldn't have enough of an effect on the functioning of the machine for it to not work, you know. And I must admit, I agreed with him. But there we are. We were both wrong. It turns out that it actually was the caps. I have no idea why it did that. Oh yeah. Actually, there was something I didn't mention in the last section. I did actually measure these when I did get them off. Pretty much most of the other caps actually were destroyed in the process. I did a lot of snipping. Those all got completely destroyed, obviously, because you have to cut them at the base. But you know, after I lost the pads, the two pads on this particular cap here, I didn't want to do that anymore. It was worth trying, but yeah, it proved in this case to be a bit brutal. So from then on, I use the either the tweezers, you know, these tweezers here, or I use the two soldering irons, as I explained to you just now, in tandem to basically lift these off. So I did actually end up with a few of these intact, and I measured a few of the, I think it was the 47 microfarad caps, and they were fine. They seem to show the correct rating. I don't have an ESR meter, so I'm not quite sure what the ESR was. Maybe that, you know, that might have actually gone south. So that's for that. Maybe that was the issue. Maybe there was high resistance on them. But I did measure these guys, and they're meant to be 1,000, and they were actually 640 each. So yeah, substantially lower than what they should be. And you can imagine that maybe that was an issue. The power supply from here wasn't good enough. But apart from that, there was obviously some kind of issue because, as you saw earlier, it was just black screen all the time. Nothing would basically get it to work. You know, I plugged in the CD-ROM. So I'm going to assume that the CD-ROM is working. We'll test that later once we've done Leigh's machine. But we've got one really good result, which is that it looks like I've recapped this properly. I have to test the sound actually. You know what the problem is? It's just getting some kind of setup where I can actually test the sound. I'm not... Now, let me think. This TV, this monitor that I have here is HDMI, so that's not going to work. VGA. Actually, it does have... Yeah, it does have components, so I could try component direct. Yeah, so I guess that's what we'll do later. The video won't be as good as you can see it now, but at least then, you know, I'll be able to test the audio and make sure the audio is working. Right. With that done, what we should do now, I think, is move on to Leigh's. That needs to be recapped. As we saw, Leigh's is working. I'm glad I did go through this because it was quite a big learning process. I've never recapped a board with this many caps before. I did the Macintosh LC475. That was actually definitely a big learning curve. I actually removed some pads on that one. Anyway, this was a lot better. Overall, no damage on any of the pads, nothing marginal apart from this one, which literally both came off, and that was because of the snipping technique. So I won't be doing that again unless it's a last resort. On Leigh's board, I won't be doing that. I'll be doing the two soldering irons or the tweezers that I've got. I'll be following the rest of the procedure, you know, using flux, chip quick, all that kind of stuff to make it come off easier. So yeah, let's not wait around any longer. Let's get on with doing Leigh's. Hey, so I was planning that we move straight on and recap Leigh's board. However, to do any sort of justice to that, to do any of it in real time is going to take a while. Probably, you know, at least, I don't know, 15 minutes, half an hour to show the technique. So it's not really practical to do in this video. We're already, you know, heading towards an hour. So what I thought it was better to do was to wrap up on my machine. This is my machine here. You can see because it has the straight audio and video port on the back of the logic board here. I've been careful all the way through to keep everything separate. Here are my screws. Here's my back plate here, which I think has, yeah, one of the clips broken on it. On mine, it's not broken on these. So don't worry, I haven't mixed up any of the pieces from either of our machines. So let's put this back together. I'm going to test it before I completely do everything up because we haven't tested the sound. So I've got the sound rig set up here. So what I've got is I've got my Harman card-on speakers. There we've got the two phono leads going into it. There's a bit of a cable foo thing going on here. Oh yeah, so phono to 3.5mm jack. That plugs into the Harman card-on speakers. And those are the jellyfish type. Quite a big fan of those. You can get those for quite a reasonable price these days. So yeah, this will be used to test the sound on my machine, make sure it's working. And I've not heard it make a peep yet, so fingers crossed that the audio circuitry isn't broken, because that would be a bit of a problem. Anyway, let's not procrastinate any further and get on with it. So this is the bottom shielding. I've already, hopefully you can see that there. That's some alcohol, which is spilt underneath the case. underneath the board, and that's because I've actually given this board a good clean. My board actually had, I think, more of a problem with leaking capacitors than Leigh's did. So yeah, that alcohol was to make sure that I didn't get any residue of the electrolyte left behind, especially in this area, because we know these two caps are the leaky buggers. Hopefully that's got rid of all of that, any sort of traces of it. So that's in. Next, we put it inside the case. And it's quite a tricky little procedure you have to go through to put this back together. It's the same as all machines, really. There's always like a sort of magic touch. I'm not saying I've got the magic touch, but I've got a bit of an idea, I think, what the process is. Okay, so that's that. That's easy enough. Next, we need to put the RF shield on top. Then we also need to put the cable from, this is the CD-ROM unit here. That cable needs to go through the RF shield. And I played around with this off camera, and it's really difficult to do that once you've got the RF shield in place. So the best technique that I found is that you need to sort of put this on end, stand up against something. And in this case, I've actually got my monitor here, just a little bit off camera. Let's bring that a bit forward so you can see it. So I'm going to rest this like this. Then I'm going to put this standing up. And there we are, so it can rest against the monitor. It's a bit heavy, so push the monitor back a little bit there, a little bit worried. Have I got this the right way around? Yes, I have. So that will plug in there. So what we need to do now is, oh, actually I've got this the wrong way around. Let's get this the right way around. There we are, that's correct. So now we've got the ribbon cable in the ballpark. So this will go in here. I'm not sure if I can put that in right now. Let's have a look. No, I can't, you see, because there's a little piece of metal there that has to go over. So what we'll do is, let's get this done first. So what I found is you have to put this like this. Oh, look at that, that's interesting. There's a little bit of corrosion there on mine. Interesting. Okay, so let's go like that. Get this over here. What I need to do now is position it so that I can get this ribbon cable. It's quite tricky to do this. Down, there we are, and into the hole. So let's see if we can do that. There we go. Make sure this is pulled up. Not easy to do with one hand. There we go. Mine is a little weak, the little clip that goes on. There we are, that's pushed in nicely. Now push that down to clamp it. Oops, there we are. Let's have a pull on it. Yeah, that's good. Okay, next now I need to let this rotate into position. There we are. That looks good. Then we can pop this in. Yeah, like I said, it's a little bit tricky. Okay, now that we've got it like that, I need to put the screws in for that, I think, after the lid goes on. So that's okay. This needs to be done now. So let me try and do that. Like I said, it's really difficult because, let me see if I can rest that. Yes, I can. Okay, let's get the screws. So there are 3 of these that need to go into the board. One here. I'm going to do these ever so slightly loose at first. Get them going in, but I'm not going to put them in all the way. There we are. That one's going in. And that's because I need to make sure that all of them align. The best way to do that is to give them a little bit of wiggle room. Yeah, that one's going in. Now this one. There we are. That's actually not correct, so that's okay. I'll put the tabs down to hold it down. And I think what I'll do is, just to give this a little bit of a clean with some alcohol, because this shielding has got lots of my fingers touching it, so just to help it corrode less, let's just wipe off my fingerprints. It's almost like a crime scene, isn't it? Okay, so let's just use some alcohol to take off. There's also some dirt on it, which is probably the last generation's worth of fingerprints. Okay, that's cleaned that up a little bit. Now I'm going to put this over carefully. It's all plugged in nicely. So hopefully now I should just be able to put this down. And what I need to do now is make sure I get this in position as well, because I find this is a bit of a pain. And it's sometimes better to put it in before you actually put the lid down. So let me try doing that again. Put that back. Oh, there we are. Clips in like that. There we are. That's good. Let's put this in quickly before this thing falls out. I seem to want to go in. Why is that? So look. Oh, okay. Some kind of maybe metal thing. Let me just check that. It looks right. Okay. Well, I don't know. Why that doesn't want to go in. Let's try and put this back in. There we are. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe I need a longer screw. I think Leigh's is longer than this, and mine is shorter. Okay, well anyway, let's carry on for now. I'll come back to that later. And let's put the lid screws in. Okay, there we go. The first thing we need to test, well actually no, let's forget about first thing. Let's just see if it works. Let me turn on the speakers. Okay, let's plug these in. Obviously, I'll need just the video from my SCART lead, or rather it's Leigh's SCART lead. Still haven't got a power supply for this machine, so I need to order a power supply and also need a video cable. I'll look online about what possibilities there are in terms of getting the video sorted so that I can maybe use HDMI or something like that. Does that plug in? Yeah, it does. Okay, great. We're going to use the Chaos Engine again to test with a special CD32 version. So of course we need a joypad as well. I'm using this one, which is Leigh's CD32 Competition Pro. Quite nice actually. I think I'll try and get a hold of one of these. If anybody out there's willing to sell one to me, please get in touch. In good condition, hopefully. Because yeah, I'd like to have one, and right now I don't have any controller. So I'm a little bit dead in the water. Have found these incredibly hard to insert. I don't know why that is. They're like super, super firm. Okay, that's plugged in. I think we are good. The moment of truth. Let's see what happens when we turn it on. Okay, so I've got the screen here so you can see it a bit more easily. Let's turn it on. It's turned on. And nothing from the CD-ROM. Nothing from the machine whatsoever. Ah, CD-ROM is spinning. That was weird. Oh, here we go. Cool, it's booting. That's really weird. It didn't do anything for quite a long time. Don't know why that is. Okay, there we are, Renegade. That's good. No sound so far. Fingers crossed. Please, please let the sound work. Please.
Sometime in the last century, an experiment.
Hey, cool.
Space
it works. Excellent.
Machine, the Chaos Engine. Although primitive,
let's just leave this place, shall we?
Incredibly powerful and turned against its creator. Its power to corrupt time and matter was out of control. A cloud of chaos descended over the land. Humans and animals were turned into ravenous beasts.
I'm laughing at that because Dan Malone told me a little insight into this intro.
Must destroy the Chaos Engine before it is too late. 6 soldiers of fortune are available for hire. The gentleman, the thug, the preacher, the brigand, the mercenary, the navvy.
The Chaos Engine. Okay, let's press this. Just pressing this button. Oh, it says it's loading. Okay, good. Will it get to into the game? Not really seeing the game running yet. Okay, that's good. So 1 or 2 players. Start new game. It's a kind of 2-player game, but you can also have the CPU play one of the players. So I'll go for myself as the brigand, and I'll have the navvy, I think is my... Did I get the navvy? Oh, maybe not. I think I accidentally chose the... What was it? The thug. Okay, alright, well anyway. Okay, the forest, the beginning. Yeah, something activated. Okay. Whoop. Oh. Okay. I was thinking this game, should I be grabbing the money or just concentrating on killing the dudes, you know? I'm not sure if this joypad is that great. There we are. Oh. I always get that at the wrong angle. Oops. There we are. Yeah, I'm safe now. What was that, extra life? I don't know. Oh. A few characters on screen, don't know why that is. Oh. Let's go. There we go. It works. Fantastic. Great. Super, super chuffed. Except, why is this screw missing? I've got another box over here with quite a large screw in it. I wonder if that's the screw from it. Let me give this a try. Will this work? Yeah, maybe that's actually the screw. Interesting. Cool. All right, well anyway, I'm very happy. I have a working CD32. I managed to recap it without destroying it. Obviously there was that one cap there, which, yeah, I'm a bit of a foobar on that really. Well, actually not a foobar, because I did manage to repair it, so it all worked out in the end. Okay, well, bit of a change of plans in this video. At the beginning, I thought I was going to try and get everything into the one video. Well, to be fair, when I set out to make this video, I did think to myself, I'm not really sure I can fit everything in that way, because unless I completely skip repairing one of the machines, it's not going to fit into one video, because even repairing one of these CD32s, one of these chaps, it's going to take more than, you know, a few minutes to fix this. Now, obviously, in the case of Leigh's, it's just a recap. We saw earlier that we tested it, and apart from the sound, everything seemed to be working fine. I'm assuming the sound is working as well, fingers crossed, because at the time I didn't really have a setup where I could test the sound. I do now, which is good. And so then we moved on and we tested my machine, and very sadly, it just didn't work. And I was quite surprised about that, actually. I thought, you know, I hadn't tested either of these machines when I, you know, was setting out to do these videos. And I just assumed that both of them would work. I'd looked at the logic boards on both of them, and they're actually both in very good condition, really. So I thought my machine would be perfectly fine. But, as we saw, no life whatsoever. And I was really surprised to find that recapping it actually did make a big difference. So there we go. The sort of wisdom that you have out there in some circles is that recapping, or caps, they're not really that necessary for the function of a machine. They're really there to smooth out the power supply to a large extent. And to be fair, this can be true. I mean, my LC475 Macintosh behind me there, I had to recap that because that was leaking pretty badly. And with all the caps removed, it does actually work. You get scratchy audio, it's a bit crackly, but apart from that, it does actually work. So generally, I guess caps can be removed and the machine will function, but not in the case, it appears at least, of my CD32, this one here. So after doing the recap, we lost one of the caps here. Both pads came off, which was a bit of a horrible moment for me. And luckily, as we saw, there was an alternative way of actually getting that connected, which made it a lot easier to fix. If it hadn't been for that, then I would obviously had to have found where those pads went to, and then put a little bodge wire from there, scraped off the traces, and then soldered it onto the trace, which is a little bit weak, really, isn't it? When you think about, you know, either going into a through hole or attaching to a trace. There's always the scope in the future that that cap could be hit and potentially wrench that trace off the board. So luckily, that was easy to fix, relatively easy to fix. And as we saw when we tested my machine, it worked, even with audio. So I did find it interesting that if you tried to test the machine with the CD-ROM plugged in, but without the shield, it does have problems. I never actually got this to boot all the way fully into the main menu of Chaos Engine. It just wouldn't get there. And it was only when I actually put the machine back together with the shield that I got full functionality. So that's interesting as well. Again, you know, the general wisdom about RF shields is that you really don't need them. It turns out, of course, they are needed if you've got RF interference, and obviously it was interfering with the CD-ROM. So that was this video. What we're going to do in the next video? Well, obviously, we're going to carry on working on Leigh's CD32. We need to recap that. And then, of course, we need to test it. I don't know really if it's going to be worse than this or better than this. I've looked at the board, and I actually think that, weirdly, even though his caps look more corroded than mine, I think his board is going to be easier to recap, but we shall see. I guess individual caps might be problematic. You never know. So we're going to do that in the next video. Going back to my machine, what do I need for it in the future? Well, I don't have a power supply, so I need to get a new power supply. Not so worried that I didn't get one in the first place, because very often they are problematic. Leigh's one over there, which I'm using on the bench to test with, is a sealed unit. I'd have to break it, I think, to get it open. And I would probably advise Leigh in the future to get a new power supply for his as well, just to make sure that the power supply doesn't go wrong and then, you know, blow up his CD32. Video, I need some kind of video connection. An obvious choice is to get an SVHS cable, but I would like to probably get HDMI, ideally, I suppose. So I'd be interested to find out about that. You know, any comments about what I should do with this are very much welcome, obviously. So please, you know, do put comments about this machine. Then there's a terrible fire I know you can put in here, which will give it a faster CPU. I'm not sure what else that gives you, but that might be interesting in the future. Not sure if I'm up for it right now, because I've got to keep my funds, keep my powder dry, as it were, for other things in the future. But yeah, basically, it's working. Very happy. Not a machine I thought I'd find in my collection, because back in the day, I was more of a big box Amiga guy. Originally, I had an Amiga 500 when I was a teenager, bought it with my own money, selling my Commodore 64. And then when I went to university, I had an inheritance, a small inheritance, and also my Amiga 500 was stolen. And luckily, I did get the insurance money from that. So I put those two things together, got myself an Amiga 1500, which is basically a 2000 with not much in it. But mine had already been upgraded. So it was basically an Amiga 2000. It had a 68030 accelerator and a hard drive, which made it a whole different level. So, you know, from that point on, I didn't really use my Amiga like a sort of pseudo console. It wasn't really a gaming machine. It was more for, I did game on it as well, to be fair. It was a great gaming machine, you can imagine. But I did use it more for doing 3D, doing some scripting, multimedia, which was sort of like the predecessor to the web today, things like that. So fast forward 30 years to now, and I didn't really know if I wanted to get one of these, but when Leigh gave me his to repair, I thought it was a good opportunity to get one, because if there was any problem with mine that was complex, it would make it much easier to fix, because I'd have Leigh's to compare with, you know, assuming that one of the two machines was actually working. And it turned out both of them were working, but yeah, as you saw, mine needed a recap. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please consider joining the channel, because that really helps me make stuff. It is expensive to do this stuff. I am looking out to improve the facilities I have in the future to make better videos. I'd like to get the repair area to be better. For instance, I'm thinking about getting a new oscilloscope. I have an O1 oscilloscope, but that requires a laptop, and in fact, the laptop has to be in Windows mode. I've got an old, it's like a 10-year-old MacBook Pro, and it does dual boot, so I can use that, but it's a real pain. So I would like to get, I'm looking at a tablet oscilloscope to make things a little easier in the repair area. Obviously, I need to get equipment, like a new camera. I would like to get a new camera as well. So yeah, if you can, please join the channel. It'd be very much appreciated. I see love going to other channels out there. I don't see that kind of love coming in my direction, which is a bit disappointing, but obviously money's tight, so I appreciate that. So anyway, yeah, if you can join, it'd be really good. If you did enjoy the video, then please click on the like button, give the like button a prod, poke, whatever it is you want to do. If you haven't been here before and you want to come back, please subscribe, obviously, And even if you are subscribed, please hit the bell, because that will give you a notification when I do more videos. And don't forget that we have the second part of this series coming out very, very soon. So yeah, please make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified about that when it comes out. All of that said, as I said, hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, take care and have a good day.